All right. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I am Robbie Cape. I'm the chairman, as it turns out, of Mountjoy. We're actually in the process of hiring a CEO right now, which is incredibly exciting. So I'm moving into the role of chairman, and I'm the co-founder of Mountjoy.
And for those who don't know anything about Mountjoy, what's your elevator pitch? How do you describe it to people?
It's really simple. We are a restaurant that is on a mission to end factory farming. Specifically, we're chicken on a mission to end factory farming. Our perspective is that this food supply chain needs to change. It needs to change very, very dramatically. And so we are attempting to show the world, starting here in Seattle, what it means to change the way food makes its way from the field to the fork for mass market food. That is our focus. And it's all about ending factory farming.
We're going to dive into all that. I want to hear about it. I want to talk about my experience eating at your pop-up store and talk about your expansion plans. But I want to go back a little bit, rewind, because you are not your prototypical restaurant executive. In fact, you were not a restaurant executive at all before Mountjoy. This is like a new entry point for you, a new career path. How in the world did you get into this? And what were you doing before this?
Before this, I was building the last technology company actually in the medical space. I co-founded 98.6 and built that for about 6 years before I left and my co-founder took over running that. And before that, I built another technology company. So I'm a tech company entrepreneur. I love building things from nothing. That's what I do for a living, and I get incredible pleasure from the process. Both the success and the failure, all of it is incredible for me. But coming out of 98.6, I was committed to my next deal being in the environmental space, and that's what ultimately the a set of studying and networking and learning and thinking a lot about the environmental space is what ultimately landed me on the vision for Mountjoy.
But there's a lot of ways you could have gone. You could have done like a farming company, built like, hey, let's think about how we treat our soil. Let's do a robot farm company. There's lots of things that are closer to what I would call a tech than
Yeah,
a consumer facing restaurant.
yeah. Some people have said that, and even when I was deciding to do it, there was a lot of people who told me that I was crazy. And unfortunately, and it's probably one of my weaknesses, the the challenge of an opportunity, even to the point of it being like crazy, for me, it's that makes it more compelling. That
Okay.
makes it
Okay.
more
You like the
exciting.
big challenge.
Yeah, even if it's borderline impossible, like to me, just trying the impossible or defying gravity is sport. It's fun. It's a lot of fun. And so when I recognized that the the level of change that I was trying to drive into the industry could best be accomplished through a restaurant, because that was ultimately the place where I got focused on restaurant. When I discovered that the fastest and the least expensive and potentially the most rewarding way to accomplish the objectives that we had set were through a restaurant, all of a sudden, I had to think hard about a restaurant. And even though, and we can talk about why all those things were the case, but the key point is that once I recognized or believed that it was about a restaurant, it was very difficult to move me off of
you were
executing
you're like, I'm gonna do a restaurant.
executing the restaurant. That's right. Like no, I didn't want to do a restaurant. I had no experience in restaurants.
This wasn't this Sladen retirement
No,
plan. Hey, when I
no,
retire,
no,
I'm gonna
no,
do a
no,
restaurant.
no, 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 no. In fact, I still remember talking to actually Matt Galvin, interesting enough, the CEO of Pagliacci Pizza and Macrina and several other things that they have going on. He has a standard line that he tells people who come to him saying, "I want to start a restaurant." He says to them, he says, "Go lie down, and when you get up, hopefully it will
It's
have
passed.
passed.
Well,
Yeah,
passed.
it will pass. Go lie down and let it pass."
It didn't
And
pass for
and
you. You lied down and you got up and you still had the idea in your head.
yeah, and it's because I was convinced, rightly or wrongly, like we can't, I don't know if I'm right or wrong. I was convinced that it was actually the best way to accomplish the objective because it gives you the opportunity. First of all, it it scales, a restaurant scales at the right pace, assuming you have access to capital, which we ended up very quickly because of the way the markets were going and because this is a restaurant. We didn't have access to nearly as much capital as I expected us to have access to. I also believed that capital would move very quickly towards such a mission oriented opportunity. And it turns out that capital doesn't care that much about mission.
Yeah.
Capital cares much more about ROI and speed, and restaurants just don't fit. So it turns out that due to a bunch of capital issues that um, I hadn't contemplated when we went in this direction, we have not been able to scale as fast as I wanted to. But back at the time when I thought about it, assuming we had access to capital, restaurants would actually scale at exactly the right rate to bring along the supply chain. You don't want to get big too fast because the supply chain evolution can't happen quickly enough. It
Yeah.
just can't.
Yeah.
Like these things take time. Um, but restaurants, if you launch one restaurant in the first year and then in the second year you launch another 2 to 4 restaurants
Yeah.
and then you launch 8 restaurants, it actually turns out to be a natural,
Mm.
perfectly aligned growth path to enable the supply chain to follow.
Yeah.
And remember,
Outside
and
of
the
a,
thesis.
I was gonna say
Go
outside of
ahead.
Mark Lohr, I think he's the only guy who knows how to really raise capital in this environment for restaurants, but
Yeah,
he's kind of a different breed.
yeah. So that was one reason that restaurants made a whole lot of sense. The other reason was this insight that a farmer brought us. Because at the beginning, I was very focused. Before we decided on restaurants, I was very focused on farmers because I had learned enough about regenerative farming to recognize that regenerative farming is better for everyone. Like it's better for the animals, it's better for the farmer, it's better for the consumer, it's better for the environment, it's better for everyone. So why, like, so
And explain to
what?
restaurateur, like someone in the restaurant business may not necessarily know the definition of regenerative farming. How do you explain to someone in a very kind of for dummies way what is the difference between normal farming and regenerative farming?
Simply put, regenerative farming leaves your natural resource in a better state than when you started to use it. It's the easiest way to put it. You're regenerating by virtue of using the natural resource, the ground, the land. You are making it better. You're regenerating
Yeah.
fertility in that soil and therefore enabling that soil to not only be more productive for you naturally, but also to execute this additional purpose, which is capturing carbon out of the atmosphere and at scale, potentially, at least intellectually and academically, the claims are that at scale, this can begin to reverse the causes of uh, of climate change.
When I look
Okay,
at the typical fast food restaurant, probably all big fast food restaurants that are doing chicken sandwiches, and it seems like every fast food restaurant now chain is doing chicken sandwiches. It is not regenerative farming; it's factory farming. It's scaled farming, and so you are really kind of doing this thing that is not, in most people's mind who have done this before, a natural fit. Describe why you thought you could make this work for something like a fast food chicken sandwich.
well, when the math that we did out of the gate indicated that you could still price a sandwich relatively competitively, like maybe
Hmm.
not competitive to the Chick-fil-A's and the Dave's hot chicken and the McDonald's. Like you're never going to be competitive to fast food. Those are fast food options, and they're going to, in all cases, serve the least expensive meat because it's the most expensive thing that they buy. They're going to serve the least expensive meat they possibly can, which is meat that is grown as efficiently, aka cheaply, as possible. Okay. And factory farming is, there's no question, is the cheapest way to grow protein. There's no question about that. It just so happens to be outrageously destructive to the employees who work in that environment, to the animals who take part, are committed to that process, and to the environment that ultimately has to support that process. I mean, it's incredibly detrimental to the point where if any of the people, not any, if most of the people who ate that food knew what how that food got from the field to the fork, they wouldn't eat it.
Hmm.
There's actually regulation in the United States that ensures that the public do not have access
Hmm.
to see what the industrial food complex actually looks like in the US because the regulators and the government knows that if people knew, they wouldn't eat the food.
Hmm.
It's that bad. It's worse than bad. It's worse than bad. The analogy that I like to make is it's just unbelievable. Remember when that whole thing, all that stuff with Foxconn went on, where people were concerned that their iPhones were being made in these factories in China,
Yeah. Yeah.
where
Yep.
where the employees were not properly taken care of, and blah 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 blah. Everyone was like, "Oh, we're not buying iPhones anymore." Foxconn, all this stuff. If people knew the way employees are treated at chicken and meat, for that matter, beef processing plants in the United States, like it is nowhere even close
Hmm.
to as bad as those Foxconn employees are treated in China.
Do you
I mean,
think?
it's borderline.
Yeah.
It's beyond embarrassing. It's horrible.
Right. And we kind of had a little bit of a reckoning or a light shine on it during the pandemic, but people quickly turned their attention away from that as people are short attention spans. And by and large, our food system is designed to produce cheap food, and people want cheap food. We saw, I think, in some
Yeah,
ways how that helped decide the election. People do not like rising food costs. So it becomes incumbent upon you to ultimately convince them that, hey, you need to pay more for a better for you, better for the environment, better for everyone's sandwich. And you think you can do that. I
yeah,
actually want you to be able to do that, but tell us how you think you can
yeah.
do that.
So we it it turns out, so when we did the math, we were capable. We understood that we could price a sandwich at between 13 and $18, which it turned out that if you really look carefully at the average ticket at the average ticket at Five Guys. Five Guys is one of my favorite personal. I happen to love their French fries. I'm a big French fry guy, and I know that French fries are a polarizing element. I happen to love the French fries at Five Guys. The average ticket at Five Guys is over $20. It's close to $23. The average ticket at Chipotle is in the very high teens. The average ticket at Evergreens and Sweetgreen that just went in right next to us up at Pine. All of these average tickets are over $20. Now, the average ticket at a Chick-fil-A or whatever is probably somewhere between $8 and $13. Okay, so it's about 50%. So it's much cheaper, but it's also horrible. So we figured out that we could actually deliver a regeneratively grown pasture raised chicken sandwich in the price range of a fast casual restaurant chain a like a Five Guys. And once we recognized that, we were like, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. Now, unfortunately, we still get compared. There's, Dave's Hot Chicken is right around the corner from us,
Yeah, yeah.
and you know, they don't give any care to the environment or whatever. I even when they opened, I saw that they were like handing out. The plastic bags are illegal in Seattle, right?
Yeah,
Those
yeah.
plastic bags that we used to get all of our fast food in, like they were, they don't care. They're like handing out plastic bags to everyone. People bring their
Illegal,
plastic
but it's
bags from
probably not
case.
enforced too hard unless someone
Well,
wants
yeah,
to.
I mean, I think I think it's like a $300 fine per,
So
per
you
person.
started thinking about you could do this. You
So we
priced it
could pull it
out.
off. We could pull it off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you do? So you started to and you ended up building a supply chain. Like I know because I ate at your pop up. What I thought was really interesting is you had this list of all the ingredients and where it was sourced from. And like the farthest thing away is maybe like a spice that you couldn't actually make in America or something like. But by
That's
and
right.
large,
Yeah.
almost everything was within Washington State. Maybe some cheese from Oregon or something, but it was all like really close. And I like that. I've never seen a menu with every item sourced from location, but you had to
Hmm.
build that.
Yep.
That took a
Yeah.
lot of
And
work, I imagine.
it was a major challenge. Uh, and we've had to, we continue to be completely transparent about where we're sourcing all our food from, but we continue to, and we've had to make some trade-offs. It turns out that building a restaurant and getting it to profitability is really, 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 really hard, especially when you don't have access to a lot of capital. And so we had to make some trade-offs and some adjustments probably sooner than I would have hoped. I would have expected that we would make those trade-offs as we approached unit 10 or 20 or 30. It turned out that even at unit 1, we had to make some hard decisions. Uh, but we remained committed to the underlying promise of ending factory farming and thinking very, very deliberately about every single sourcing decision that we made, every single one. And we've stood by that. I mean, we've stood by it, maniacally, absolutely maniacally.
Is the trade-offs that you're talking about? You may say, okay, we're gonna have to get this cheese from like a larger CPG or corporate brand versus getting it from like someone at a Saturday market. I'm just exaggerating, but like, did you have to make some trade-offs on in terms of like we may get someone from something from more of a larger scaled
That's
corporate?
exactly right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But our commitment was, I mean, if you look at our promises, they're up on the wall. Uh, the our commitment remained that we're going to end factory farming. We're going to continue to stay outrageously committed to the employees at every step in the supply chain. Obviously, that our focus as we selected ingredients was going to be on climate friendly producers. And then lastly, and I think this is the most critical piece, that we were going to always be transparent. So even in the scenarios where we need to make a trade off, we're always going to let people see where the food is coming from.
So let's talk about like you were when I talked to you when you first opened your pop up. There's a lot of focus on technology still, even though you were like building a restaurant. You still saw yourself as a technology executive. You had your CTO was a former employee who came to you and liked the mission. And so
Yep.
talk about like how you're weaving in technology around this mission of making and trying to end regenerative or trying to end factory farming.
The timing of your question is incredibly compelling. It's almost, well, you heard me indicate before that my role is shifting a little bit, and the reason is because of our technology. So we have built basically all of the technology that runs Mountjoy is built inside. We built it inside because wanted to we wanted to reimagine the experience that consumers have with a restaurant. And at least at the time when we considered doing this, it was very, very challenging for us to do that reimagination on top of one of the existing restaurant technology platforms like Square or
Toast or something.
Toast
Yep. Yep.
or Clover. And so we built the whole thing ourselves. We built the POS, We built the kitchen display system. We built the operational framework that generates reporting and everything all around that, all on AWS. And that took us about a year. Justin was actually quite fast, incredible that he built all that himself. We had a second employee who was helping him for a little bit until we could
Justin,
afford it
your
anymore.
CTO.
That's right, Justin Kaufman. And then about 9 months ago, he finally, like we had sort of the table stakes done, because there wasn't a bunch of reimagination around that. Like a POS is a POS, a KDS is a KDS. It's not all that exciting. Yes, we believe ours is a little better than the existing ones on the market, but it's not revolutionarily better. But finally, earlier this year, Justin got to start spending time thinking, well, he and I together started to reimagine the experience. And interestingly enough, most of the reimagination happened when you look at the user experience, the flow, the sort of the arc, the narrative, most of it happened after the transaction was done.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so since about this past March, February, March, we started putting almost all of our technology investment was going into these new elements that are all about post-transaction engagement with the customer.
Like, what do you mean
For
by
the,
that? What type of engagement are we talking about?
I mean, so I urge you to try it. I don't know if you've been back to the restaurant now. You
I'm
have
heading
two
down there
restaurants to choose from.
next week for your second restaurant opening, so I will
Okay,
check it out
good.
there.
Oh, cool. So you'll get a chance to see it, and you'll interact with the system. But basically, I mean, I'm not going to be able to describe it all, but we basically have built this platform that, with the on the shoulders of AI, without any involvement from human resources, we are able to engage with customers. We successfully engage with customers via text after their transaction with us is done. And so, like, I'll describe two different narratives, okay? And ours will be the second. The first narrative is the existing systems. You know how you, like, if you get if you go shop at anyone who supports, let's pick Toast, you can add the capability to Toast if you are a restaurant to do loyalty. They'll send you a text message after you transact, and they'll tell you how many points you earned. Okay. Next time that happens to you, try to respond to that message and see what happens.
It bounces.
Okay. Well,
back,
I'm gonna. Well, it either bounces back or nothing happens. Nothing. And our perspective is, what a lost opportunity. Like, this person gave you their phone number, and you have now landed a text in their inbox that they are looking at. Like, how often does a brand send you a message that you actually look at? Very rarely. Okay, you're busy doing other things, but you probably looked at that message. And I mean, just an incredible lost opportunity. Why not engage with them? Engage with that customer. Ask them how their meal was. And when they tell you, respond. And maybe there's other things you can do with them. Maybe you can get their feedback on something now that you have this engagement with them. Or maybe you can learn a little bit more about them, so that you can serve them better next time they come into your restaurant. I mean, there's any number of things. You and I could probably brainstorm for an hour about all of the wonderful things that a brand could do with a consumer after their transaction is done.
So you're starting to build a relationship and a profile around something that you can maybe personalize. You can personalize the experience next time.
Everything. And so we have been working on that for the past 9 months. And we very, very recently decided that we are going to spin this technology out of Mount Joy, and Justin and I are going to focus.
You're going to AWS the technology. So you're going to do.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a new startup that you're going to basically compete with the Toast of the world. That's what you're saying.
No, we don't. So no, actually, we don't want. So one of the decisions we made is that we want ultimately, anyone who's running any POS should, be able to interact with this capability. And so we're actually building it on top of existing technology.
So are you calling it a loyalty or a kind of
No,
a
it's a customer engagement platform.
okay? And is this new startup have a name and has it got funding?
I'm not ready to announce the name, and I'm not ready to announce, and we don't yet have funding. This is like literally hot off the press.
So you and Justin are heading out to head up this new startup that will be
That's right.
creating that is creating a new restaurant customer engagement platform. You're going to find a new CEO because you're going to be stepping into the role of chairman of Mount Joy, and you're going to continue to look. Are you going to continue then to grow Mount Joy organically through growth and not necessarily through
100%.
venture funding?
Oh yeah. Yeah. 100%. Well, no, I mean, we will uh we've actually we've hired a new CEO. We're not ready to announce who it is yet. Um he's a pillar of the restaurant community here in Seattle, and we're very excited to have him. And our plan has not changed. I mean, we're gonna prove our unit economics on several units, and then we will go get institutional financing to drive to many, many, many units.
And we didn't tell the story on this podcast, but I do want you to at least briefly for those who are familiar with the restaurant scene in Seattle and just more broadly familiar with the name Ethan Stoll. You were doing some cold emailing, trying to kind of connect with people as you're this tech exec trying to get into restaurants, and you got a response from Ethan Stoll.
Yeah.
Talk about that and how that kind of changed your trajectory.
Yeah, well, I mean, changed my trajectory. I'm pretty confident that I would not have co-founded Mountjoy if not for Ethan Stoll. I couldn't have done this myself.
And for people who don't
Uh,
know Ethan Stoll, if you're not from Seattle, a lot of people probably know of him, even if you're not from Seattle. Very famous. He's probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous, restaurateur in Seattle. And so
oh
it's a
yeah,
big deal
I
for
mean
you.
he's
Yeah.
well, so he's definitely. I'd say so. He's the largest. We know that for a fact. He's Ethan Stoll Restaurants (ESR) is the largest restaurant group in the Pacific Northwest. Number one, and number two, I agree with you. I've never done the study, but I would tend to guess that he is the best known name in food in the Pacific Northwest.
Maybe Tom Douglas or
Uh,
him. Maybe it's a
yeah,
toss up,
well,
but
yeah, but Tom, Tom has, I think it's very clear, he's kind of pulled back, whereas, ESR is expanding faster than
yeah,
ever,
yeah, yeah.
right? Um, and so, when I reached out to Ethan and Ethan responded like, yeah, it was a cold call. I mean, I literally sent him a message through the contact us form on his website. And when he got back to me and then actually got incredibly excited about the the opportunity that I was talking to him about, the opportunity of building a fast casual restaurant chain on the shoulders of the values of regenerative agriculture. And those values, I mean, you asked about regenerative before. Those values run much much wider and deeper than just the agriculture, right? They speak to the ingredients, they speak to how you treat employees, they speak to how you relate to your customers. The values are a thread that you can weave through your entire all aspects of your business. And he got incredibly excited about that. And I'd say that that's the main reason why I developed confidence that we could do this. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have launched this without him.
So you're opening your second restaurant next week. Tell us about that.
No, actually,
What's the
so
news?
it was it's very interesting how this came to be. Um, we um, we had so you saw our food truck, or people have been at our food truck. We've since sold our food truck, but we had this food truck, and I was able to get introduced to someone at Amazon who to kind of brainstorm with Amazon. I thought Amazon would be the perfect place for this food truck, and so I was able to connect with an individual on their real estate team who kind of figuratively, she put her arms around me and just brought me in. I mean, it was just absolutely wonderful. And she and her team were incredibly excited about our vision, our mission, the alignment with Amazon's values related to their climate pledge. And so we spent a bunch of time down in South Lake Union looking at a bunch of different places in South Lake Union where we could put the truck. And we were like, consider it. Like, yeah, there were some very creative ideas. But in the midst of that, um, she took me to this spot at the deck that where there was an Evergreens. And it just so happened I knew the CEO of Evergreens at the time, so I could actually figure out, I could actually learn from him how well this unit does. And it was this space that kind of was not, it was fine, but we all agreed the space at the deck could be so much more, could be so much more. And so that together with Amazon's excitement about our mission sent me and Amazon together down a path of reimagining that space and what it would look like if they brought Mountjoy into that space. And so that was like that whole discussion started like that. I remember our tour down of South Lake Union and looking at places for the truck. That all happened last December and January. And by February, March, we had sort of moved towards this imagination of Mountjoy at the deck. And the rest is history. I mean, we ended up coming to lease agreement with them on that, and we actually launched today, Mike.
All right.
So we ended up moving. How often does a restaurant
You
move
launched
up
early.
their launch date? Yeah, we
Yeah,
launched
that
early.
doesn't
So
happen.
we did our friends and family yesterday, and it went. I mean, we've put together an amazing team there, and uh, they nailed it yesterday, and they all looked at each other, and Antonio, who's Antonio and Rihanna are running that unit, and they looked at each other and they're like, we can launch tomorrow. Let's do it. And so
Awesome.
we launched. I was down there. I was down there at 11:30. I had to rush back because I wanted to get back for this call. And there was a line. I mean, I was delighted. And the unit is beautiful, and Amazon did such an amazing job with the build out. We feel very fortunate to have been sort of introduced into Amazon's real estate team. They've been beyond wonderful. I mean, they've
That's
just
awesome.
been incredible. Yeah.
So stepping back, because your goal is to end factory farming. What would you say to people in the restaurant industry who don't have the resources or the time to reinvent their supply chains, that want to serve a delicious chicken sandwich? Like, what are some ways in which other people in the restaurant space can take some tips from you, or is it just too hard? Will they continue to buy their chicken from Tyson because it's just too hard to do this?
No. Uh, well, no, they do not have to buy their chicken from Tyson or Purdue. They absolutely no, they do not need to. There are other options out there. Um, there are there are many very good options for them, and they don't have to cost that much more. Will like the margin of their chicken whatever is huge right now. It's very large. It might be helping to support their business. It's sort of like up there with their Coca-Cola. I mean, you know how
Hmm.
the cola. It turns out that the the least the least healthy or most environmentally problematic elements on your menu
The most
probably
profitable.
they probably have the strongest margins, right? Because they're running at scale, and their ingredients are cheap, very cheap. But you don't have to like those margins aren't necessary.
Where would they
Like
start? Where would they start if they want to kind of, and quite honestly, a lot of restaurants are not going to be able to do this. They're going to continue to look to survive by serving whatever factory farm chicken they can get. And I'm not trying to guilt anyone here, But I'm just saying, if someone wants to explore maybe doing something in kind of the area of regenerative farming, how should they at least look at it?
Call your meat distributor. EC Wilson is ours, and Jason at EC Wilson is. Uh, I mean, sometimes I liken him to a saint. I mean, he helped us out in some tough spots that we were in with our chicken. EC Wilson is absolutely amazing, but there's a number of great meat distributors here in the Pacific Northwest, and ask them to get you a sample of Mary's chicken.
Hmm.
Okay,
Mary's Chicken.
Mary's
Okay.
is not a brand that is very well known because branding is not hasn't been a big focus of theirs. I was delighted. So the first time I saw Mary's, I hadn't even heard of Mary's uh, until late last year, and I started to learn. Mary's is starting a regenerative program. There were a couple of other national chicken brands that were doing regenerative, like well, let's just focus on Mary's. I don't have to bring up the others. So I learned about Mary's kind of on the edge. It was just kind of like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
mention in my ear, and then I went to Bob's Meats. I decided that we were going to get a pasture raised turkey for Thanksgiving. So end of November, I went to uh, to Bob's, and I picked up my pasture raised turkey, which by the way was 4 times the price of a regular turkey. And I get this box, and it says Mary's on the side. I'm like,
Hmm.
oh my God, like Mary's is real. Wow, they're like literally they've got quite a distribution channel today. Like the butchers here in town are selling Mary's.
And Mary's is based where?
They're in California.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. And they have, I mean, they've done a really wonderful job. They have they're sort of, first of all, they're completely vertically integrated, but they also have these different lines of chicken. This is the way to do it, by the way, where they are an example of of a farm that has a scaled operation and therefore is able to get some economies of scale for that operation for the kind of chicken that we probably wouldn't buy, but plenty of other people buy. But they also have, as part of their lineup, pasture raised regenerative chicken,
Hmm.
and it is more expensive, but it's not 10 times more expensive, and it's incredible.
And this is one of those situations where when you talked about having to make some trade-offs, I remember when you first started, you were actually working with local farmers in Washington State. That proved probably too difficult, not scalable enough. And you found someone who's doing it nationally, has built out distribution.
That's exactly right. That's
Okay.
exactly right. And the interesting thing is the the issue that we found with the local farmers had nothing to do with the farmers. Like the farmers, like it was okay. Like the farmers could raise their chicken at a reasonable price. It was a little bit too expensive. It was it was all of the stuff that happens after the farm
Mm.
that ended up being at scale. We would have been able to solve it, and I think that if we had had the kind of funding that we were hoping to have, we probably would have gotten there very quickly, or much faster than we will now with the sort of more conservative approach. But it was that supply chain, it was the processing and the transportation and the last mile
Yeah.
associated with buying from that source that ended up getting in the way of us actually operating a restaurant. As an example, like when you're in the restaurant business, like you can't take an order of 2 months worth of chicken at once. You just can't. It's not like, where do you put it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you need a distributor to handle your, what I call the last mile, right? And to be able to deliver, like they store some amount of chicken and they deliver chicken to you multiple times a week. I mean, that's the role of a Plymouth, or I mentioned Jason at EC Wilson. Like that's their role, and that's just a piece of the supply chain. And by the way, I'm talking about parts of the supply chain that don't need to like They don't need to like these people are operating wonderful businesses that treat their employees incredibly well, and they care deeply about the environment, and they're wonderful, wonderful organizations. So there's no like we don't need to change any of that, but for a restaurant to operate at any level of efficient scale, like even at one unit, you need all that stuff is tied together. It's not just about the farmer. The farmer is an important piece. That's where it all starts, but everything else has to be integrated.
Yep. Yep. All right. So Robbie, congratulations on opening at Amazon today and all the success and your new company. Where can people find out more about Mountjoy and what you're doing?
So we'd love for them to go to mountjoy.com. That's one place that is we put an incredible amount of information on Mountjoy, and you can learn about our menu and about the story and about about how we source our food. And you can learn about our locations. And the other two things to do is please visit us at Pine. Our Pine location is at 11th and Pine in Capitol Hill. And then please come see our brand new location in South Lake Union at the corner of Thomas and Boren. It's brand new, and we'd love to see you there. Absolutely love to see you there.
I will see you there next week, Robbie. And congratulations. And we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.